I want to actually address some of that because I actually have a perspective here as to why a power two breakaway has a lot of issues with it. And the fact why I think that it won't happen, I do think still that they are the main two power brokers in college football. It's not a question. It's not a question at all. Here is what I mean. Here, another current threat to the NCAA is the Big Ten and the SEC. So we already saw the legal battles that they're going through. There's just a zillion gajillion things that are happening right now. They're being sued for, there's literally like, there's multiples of nine figures of lawsuits that are on the table right now. There's almost billions. I mean, I it's absolutely crazy how much money is on the table right now because remember here, if you operate on the old model, you're sitting there, you're thinking, well, I mean, what are we talking about here? I mean, why can't we go back to the old college football world? Well, the old college football world, again, just like Larry Fink, it was under a dictatorship. Yes, you knew what to expect of it a little bit more, but at the same time, it's not fair, and you might need a little bit of destruction here. I'm just saying that's all I'm saying with here. The current threat to the NCAA, like I said, Big Ten and the SEC. One, they formed an advisory group. It was formed a couple of days after the Tennessee and Virginia's lawsuit of the NCAA. And a big conversation we're going to start here is about a power two breakaway. Big Ten and the SEC form advisory group as conferences bond tightens. So, Heather Dinich, Big Ten and the SEC have formed a joint advisory group of university presidents, chancellors, and athletic directors to, quote, address the significant challenges facing college athletics and how to improve the student athlete experience. This right here happened. This was as of Friday. The ruling on the 31st was when they had the lawsuit. Like I said, this was like a week period where it was like recruiting violations for Tennessee. Tennessee's fighting back. And then the SEC even and the Big Ten are like, let's form together and see if we can get our kind of a little, a joint task force to kind of address some of this stuff. The article continues. The move is significant because it reflects a growing relationship between the two largest and wealthiest conferences and their respective commissioners as the balance of power continues to tilt in their favor in the evolving collegiate landscape. Sources have told ESPN that Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey have been working closely together for more than their predecessors had, at a time when conference expansion has further separated their leagues from the other FBS conferences. Like I said, the SEC will welcome Oklahoma and Texas, while the Big Ten will add Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC from the Pac-12 that is on the verge of extinction. It's still alive. We're going to get to that in a second here. It's still alive technically, but we're going to get to that in a second. The advisory group was formed in reaction to, quote, recent court decisions, like I said, that Tennessee one we just talked about, pending litigation. Like there's 5 pending litigations as of right now that I can count, a patchwork of state laws and complex governing proposals, according to the Big Ten's news release. The Big Ten and the SEC have substantial investment in the NCAA, and there is no question that the voices of our two conferences are integral to the governance and other reform efforts, quote, Petitti said in a statement. Quote again, we recognize our similarity in our circumstances as well as the urgency to address the common challenges we face. The Big Ten and the SEC advisory group will act as a consultant to the leagues, but won't have the authority to implement changes. A lot of people were concerned about that. Well, not concerned. A lot of people had hypothesized, what does this mean? Does this mean we're going to have a breakaway of the Pac-2? Is this going to be an alliance thing where basically what was happening was Kevin Warren allied with the ACC and the Pac-12 to basically freeze them, figure out the contract negotiations, and then ultimately go to the point to where you can add those other two teams? I don't really know there. I just know that it was kind of a unique situation, especially when they added USC and UCLA. They had the alliance and then they betrayed them. I think Greg Sankey is a little more savvy than that. But again, I know that there's one member. Texas A&M is a little perturbed that Texas is in the SEC now. So could Texas A&M be a team that the Big Ten wants? Presence in Texas, outside of Houston. I mean, I'm not going to, we could speculate that all day long. There's plenty of channels out there that do that. I want to just talk about what this advisory group means. Like I said before, it won't have any authority to implement changes. Its composition and timetable and the specific issues it will tackle are still unclear. What it has done, though, is further bind the two behemoths together. Quote, there are cultural and social impacts of our student athletes, our institutions, and our communities because of the new collegiate athletics environment, Sankey said in a statement. We do not have predetermined answers to the myriad of questions facing us. We do not expect to agree on everything, but enhancing interaction between our conference will help us focus on common sense solutions. Here's what I'm thinking here. With this, a lot of people instantly jump to the power two breakaway. Power two, we've talked about that forever. First of all, I'm gonna let you guys know there is no power two. There's none. Whenever you talk about a power two breakaway, that's like saying the power two media providers, the ESPN and Fox. Technically, that's true, but in reality, the power brokers of college football are the fans. If we're being honest here, because here's what I mean by that. Because ESPN and Fox respond to the fans. They have to respond to the fans. Well, actually, technically, they respond to the advertisers who respond to the fans. That's actually technically how it goes. It's viewer to advertiser, advertiser to network, network to provider of the sport. That's the direction it kind of goes there. So with this, a lot of people are saying, oh, the SEC and the Big Ten. First of all, the SEC and the Big Ten aren't even really in charge of themselves. Because if I were to tell you that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to stay themselves, let me ask you, who has more power? I'm going to put a group of schools, and then I'm going to put the rest of the Big Ten and the SEC in a group. Okay, so the SEC and the Big Ten, everybody over here, except for in the group 2, SEC and Big Ten, but I take out LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. I put those 6 schools over here, everybody else over there. Who has more power? Yeah, this one. 100%. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Alabama, Georgia, LSU. And then I think actually, you know what? I'll pause on that. Add Oklahoma and Texas over there. Now it's not even close. It's not even close. Okay? No. The USC, nope. USC, nope. Washington, Oregon, nope. Those 8 versus everybody else, not a question. That's the most powerful group. Okay? So if this was actually going to be what it's going to be, we're talking about a power 1 where they kind of get rid of the lower half of those leagues. I've been talking about that for a long time. But again, I want to make sure you're clear about this. You see what this says here. I think this is more of a shot across the bow. I think that's the term you use, shot across the bow. Basically just like a warning shot, a chest bump. What are you going to do? Because right here, the Big Ten and the SEC advisory group will act as a consultant to the leagues. They have no authority to implement changes. Its composition, its timetable, and the issues it will tackle are still unclear. Basically, what it is like, we don't know what we're going to do, but we need to address the fact that there's a lot of crap happening, and we're going to join together. Basically, I think it's like NCAA, get your act together. Again, Joel Klatt said this before. Joel Klatt was like, he was talking to the NCAA, and he was like, listen, here's the deal. This is a couple years ago. It's like maybe like 5, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. And Joel Klatt was like, here's the deal, NCAA. You could do 2 moves you don't want to do right now, or you could do 15 moves you really don't want to do 5 years from now. Guess what happened? They're now doing the 15 moves they really don't want to do right now because they didn't get right out up front and handle this. Whether or not it's because the NCAA is inept or not, whether or not it's because interconference, interstate regulations, maybe that's the reason why the NCAA was asking for congressional rulings. Whatever the situation is there, all I know is the fact that the NCAA is messing up. It's dying. And the Big Ten and the SEC are cozying up. A lot of people admit for the longest time, they're cozying up. Oh my gosh. I want to actually address some of that because I actually have a perspective here as to why a power two breakaway has a lot of issues with it. And the fact why I think that it won't happen, I do think still that they are the main 2 power brokers in college football. It's not a question. It's not a question at all. Here is what I mean. Power two breakaway issues. There's a couple things here. 1, antitrust laws. 2, Big 12 basketball. 3, regression in the sport expansion. We'll get to that in a second. And 4, and a small one, but SEC crap week. Okay, so first one, antitrust laws. Antitrust laws basically means unfair monopolies within a given field, whatever that is. The SEC and the Big Ten don't officially have that, but they unofficially have it. In the same way that, like, if I took Chick-fil-A, Burger King, and Subway and McDonald's, those 4, that right there is like 1/3 of all, maybe even half of all of the sales in terms of, how do I say it? Like fast food, something like that. Same thing with the SEC. SEC and Big Ten together, that's like 3/4 of the college football blue bloods. USC, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Alabama, Georgia. I mean, think about it. That's absolutely crazy. But with antitrust laws, you got to kind of overcome that. So they could form their own breakaway. It'd be a lot of red tape. There'd be a lot of complications with that. But the big thing with that is I think that the rest of the universities would have the ability to be like, okay, that's not really fair that you separate from us. We've already had this thing going. You've already got your conferences, everything's set that like that. I think that's a lot harder of an issue. And I'm not 100% sure if the power to want to actually break away in the way we think about it like that. So the first one there is antitrust laws. It's a lot more difficult than just, oh, they're just going to break away. It's a lot more difficult than that. Number two is Big 12 basketball. I know a lot of you people are like, what the hell does Big 12 basketball do? First of all, say what you want about Brett Yormark. Dude's a genius. Absolute genius. Whether or not he's overplaying his hand, he's being arrogant, I'm not even worried about that. Okay? He is so damn smart because what he did was he was like, listen, I see the world. 80% of the money's in football. Unless we can get Notre Dame, there's no football entity that we can add out there, even if we like, Colorado and Utah and Arizona. We like them a lot. We like BYU and Cincinnati, Houston, UCF. We like them a lot. But if we could add Miami and Clemson, we're going to do it. If we could add Texas and Oklahoma, we would do it. Unfortunately, they lost Texas and Oklahoma. And they couldn't add Florida State. They actually tried to. But again, like I said before, unfortunately for them, is they realized they were like, okay, we can't. If we try and keep on battling these guys in football, unless we can get Notre Dame, and we can't, we're just going to lose that battle every time. So what he did was he found the strategic partners to add. If you think about Big 12 basketball right now, Big 12 basketball, think about this next year. Arizona, BYU is a pretty good team. Baylor, Houston, Kansas. Those are awesome, awesome brands of basketball. And remember, this is only like an 18-team league. 16, I think it's 16 or 18. I'm not 100% sure. So it's only a team that's a league with under 20 members, and it's got some of the biggest college basketball brands in the world. With that, what they've done is they basically said, okay, whatever happens, whatever the next iteration of college sports is, if you don't include us, you are screwed. Meaning, like, in terms of from a basketball perspective, you're screwed. Now, I know the basketball revenue is way below football revenue, but I am saying the fact that Brett Yormark understood this. He was, like I said before, he wasn't trying to. It was an apples to oranges comparison. He's like, I can't collect apples like the Big Ten, the Big Ten and the SEC can, but I can collect some oranges. So what he done here is he made sure that happens there. So whatever happens there, if the Big Ten and the SEC want to be associated with Big 12 basketball, and their basketball program sure do, whatever the iteration is, maybe again they might give a little bit for the fact that they would include the Big 12 in that, but they would also gain the fact they would have the basketball. Again, it's a little bit there. It's not huge, but it's something. It's the best play he had to make. He did the best thing he could. A next reason here, and this one is a big one that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about right here. Regression in sport expansion. So think about this. Right now, there are 134 teams, next year, there's going to be 134 teams with the addition of Kennesaw State. Firstly, I'm a big EA college football fan. I love the fact that Kennesaw State is in the game. New Jersey's new stadium, it's all going to be really cool. But with that, 134 teams, right now in 2024, or not necessarily, and on July 1st of 2024, which is the beginning of the NCAA calendar year, that's going to be 134 teams. There's going to be a 12-team playoff. They are still deciding on whether or not it's going to be a 6-6 or a 5-7 model. I'm going to get into why it's probably going to be a 5-7 model. But the fact that Washington State's athletic director Schultz is doing his job. We'll get into that in a second. But basically the fact that a watered-down playoff would really hurt the league, meaning this. There's 134 teams. There's a 12-team playoff. And let's just say it's a 5-7 model. Unfortunately, if you take that, 134, and you cut out the Big Ten and everybody but the Big Ten and the SEC. So the Big Ten is going to be at 18 teams next year, and the SEC is going to be at 16 teams next year. That's going to be 34 teams, so 2 more than the NFL. 12-team playoff. So what you're saying is, I actually have to show you, this is absolutely ridiculous, because can you imagine what a 12-team playoff would look like with just the SEC and the Big Ten? It would be so bad. We're actually going to get into a second here because, like I said, a watered-down playoff. Do we reduce the playoff? Unfortunately, it's college football expansion is kind of like, how do I say this? It's kind of like Social Security. There might have been some issues with it. It's never going away. Okay, it's once it got voted, it's never going away. You're never going backwards. The NFL currently has a 17-game regular season schedule. Do you honestly think they're going to go back to 16? Everybody knows they added to get to 17 so they can get to 18 teams. Everybody knows that. So unfortunately, for the people who think that like, oh yeah, well, we're going to go back. We're just going to reduce the games. That's not on the table. Meaning, if you don't reduce the games, you don't reduce the playoffs, because as an example right now in the FCS. The FCS doesn't have conference championship games. No conference championship games. But they have a 24-team playoff. Let me think about it. That's 24-team playoff with 8 first-round buys. So there's 16 teams play the first round, and then the 8 more jump in, and they go on from there. Unfortunately, for college, for FBS, I don't believe that they want to get to a 2014 playoff. That's a lot of games. First of all, that's another limitation. It's just how many games you can play. So as much as like conferences can't get 60 members, there's not going to be 3 conferences with 60 members. That's just going to be so goofy. There's so many teams that will not even touch each other. It's such a weird part there. But I will say the fact that when you look at this, watered down playoff, meaning that, like, could you imagine? I'm actually going to go through right here to show you what a playoff would look like between the Big 12 and the SEC. It was, I think the first round was Northwestern visiting LSU. Yawn. Absolute yawn. Go look at that right there. Go look at the standings for that. It would, I actually put the standings in the description so you could find it. It would be an absolute yawn of a playoff. That's one thing. So one that you have to tell the TV partners, like, first of all, we're not even sure if these mid-tier brands are capable of attracting people like we want them to. So we might not even include them. That's one. Two, do we reduce the amount of playoff games? First of all, the TV partners are like, absolutely not. We love these playoff games. These playoff games give us top flight matchups. We wanted to add Oklahoma and Texas to these leagues, USC and UCLA to these leagues for more top flight matchups. The last thing we want to do is reduce what we're trying to expand. You wouldn't want to do that either. Do you want to take away conference championships? Absolutely not. There's a lot of issues with that. And then last but not least, a really small one here. But imagine telling the SEC, hey, by the way, no more SEC crap week. Because the Big Ten doesn't have a Big Ten crap week. They don't. The SEC, I know the SEC's argument, so we have a lot of interconference games late in the season that we'd like to play. Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida State, South Carolina, Clemson, Louisville, Kentucky. I totally get it. But that would probably be, I don't know if the SEC is going to keep crap week. That's a small thing. The bigger one is that third one there, the regression and sport expansion. I think that if you look at it right now, I've done a couple of videos on this before. If you take the field, if you take the top of the G5, it's almost always as good or better than the middle and bottom of the Power 5, always. Now, again, you have a couple of exceptions. Like this year, Liberty got crushed. Whether or not Liberty should have been there or not, I know my boy Bronco Blademeyer, who's a Liberty alum, he says they were. I don't know. The year before, tell USC, who was 1 2-point conversion at Utah away from being in the CFP, tell them that Tulane wasn't very good. That's what I'm saying. Tell Boise State, Memphis, UCF when they were there. Like I said before, the thing about this is, if you take that group, typically they're going to have 1 or 2 teams that can compete. Maybe not as many. Obviously, the group of 5 champion, so to say, isn't going to be a number 1 seed per se. But I am saying there's a lot of value in that. I think that the media partners would step in there because, unfortunately, like I said before, can you imagine like a 7-5 Indiana making a 16-team playoff versus a 6-6 South Carolina? Like, that's what we're talking about here. So I think that, unfortunately, the cooler heads will prevail. I think that there's a lot of issues with that. I also think that the Big 12 or the Big 10, the SEC, they don't want to separate completely. I do think what they want to do is they want to expand the playoff. We're going to get in that in a second here. But like I said before, with this, there's a lot of issues with the Power 2 breakaway. And I think that at the end of the day, the SEC and the Big 12 or the Big 10 want to have the rest of the members in college football. But maybe like we're going to be directing it now. And that's totally makes sense. I totally get that. All right, guys. That is it for me. I am going to make sure, like I said, I'll cut this up into some videos. If you want me to get anything you want in the in terms of a video to be made, get in the comments. Let me know. I appreciate all of you guys so much. But that'll be it for me, guys. I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed here. But I'll see you guys later. I am out.